Ethical governance is considered a cornerstone of any well-developed nation. Leaders who adhere to moral principles more likely to make decisions that prioritize the common good over personal interest. They are said to be more accountable to their citizens, maintain transparency in their actions, and work towards reducing corruption. A member committee on Nigeria's Values Charter, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, joins us now to discuss the place of ethics and values in national development, as well as the type of values that Nigeria needs for national growth. He will also be focusing on the idea behind the constitution of a 10-man Committee on Value Charter. Thanks for being here, Professor Adeniyi. It's good to have you with us as always.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
All right, so where are we?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Where are we on ethics and values in Nigeria? You know, if you want to look at the political space, as it were.
Well, I imagine that we're nowhere. You know, our value system is haphazard, our value system is nebulous, and sometimes practically non-existent. And this is one of the reasons why we'll find ourselves subscribing to just anything that come our way. And do not forget the trite saying that if you do not believe in anything, you subscribe for anything, you fall for anything. We're not practically guided as a people. Morals are non-existent, and that's why you see crime constantly on the increase, and the crime has no respect. Crime is actually indiscriminate. You find it at different levels of government in the public and private spaces, etc., etc. We have seen nations around the world subscribing to lofty ideals. You know, the example of the United States, yes, often comes to mind. If you ask them, they will tell you very clearly that they subscribe to the values of happiness, prosperity, you know, and of course, freedom. You know, those are cherished values. In the UK, it's egalitarianism, you know, entrepreneurship, you know, inclusion, etc., etc. Some other countries too have had reasons, you know, to mouth values, you know. So values are intangibles that propel development, you know, beyond the tangible represented in the physical. Development is not just about physical elements, you know, structures, infrastructures, yeah, utilities, etc., etc. Development is also, should also be evident in the minds, you know, the minds of people, the psychology of people, something that binds them together at the level of ideology, you know, and that's why the ideology most times, when they are positive, they can be very, very propelling, you know, because there's a sense in saying again that minds often matter than matter. You know, the mind can be very, very propelling. Ideas that germinate and lead to development, practical development, actually come from the productivity of the mind. And the mind is better when it is shaped by values. And in the context of a nation, we're talking about a commonality of values. In our own context, I think government is probably thinking around defining some values, you know, maybe 7 of them, namely inclusivity, equality, democracy, you know, egalitarianism, entrepreneurship, and maybe 2 or 1 other, as the case could be. So I think it's a good way to go, because we've made the argument severally that it's because we do not subscribe to any values. Our values is just heaved around consumerism and moneyism. You know, money, everything revolves around money. If you have money, then of course you have a voice in this country. That's not how it should be. There are some other values that we need to subscribe to, you know, beyond the beyond money, you know, beyond transaction. System processes shouldn't just be a matter of transaction. Merit should be included as well, as the case could be.
Very good, Professor Adeniyi. But it's interesting you mentioned values are intangible here. But who are the custodians of those values? Is it the government or the electorate? And of course, how does one uphold these values, as it were, as a country?
Well, it's something that happens in a process. It is largely processual. And of course, it comes through long period of gestation. Gestation through the instrumentality of institutions, you know, through the school system, through other venues of socialization, religious institution, traditional institutions, workplaces, etc., etc. But in this instance, it can be driven quick enough through the instrument of the schools. If it is ingrained into the curriculum of schools, it could go a long way in helping us to start from the very level at which education begins. And of course, by the time it lasts for a long time, if there is sustainability, if succeeding governments share in the values, being projected, of course, it will be ingrained in the generality of the citizens. Nigeria is a multi-ethnic state, a multi-ethnic plural society. There's so many reasons why we are heterogeneous, but of course, irrespective of our heterogeneity, some level of bondedness, some level of bonding can be fostered if we subscribe to some national ethics, some ethos, some virtues, cardinal objectives, that will form the string around which our characteristics, our behavior, our attitudes rotate. But now people just talk through the prism of their classifiers, the prism of their differences, identifying first for you their ethnic origins before the nation as a whole. But of course, if we have a shared value system that will mouth, irrespective of its character as an intangible, then of course it could drive, how we associate ourselves with a nation state called Nigeria, and of course, permeate the dimensions of the classifiers, be it ethnicity, be it religion, be it income group, be it gender, and all such things as the case could be.
Very good, Professor. Now, we've seen the way strong cultural values shape the fortunes of a country. We can use Japan as a case study, for example. Now, where are we in Nigeria? Why aren't we taking a cue from a country like that? Briefly, please.
Yeah, well, Japan is obviously a developed country, and there's no reason why we cannot learn from them. And that's what I think actually is driving the authorities to making this new initiative. We have seen countries having very strong values. In Germany, for instance, education is not just regarded as education. It's regarded as culture building. And in some other countries, in the United States, for instance, is seen as a pedestal to freedom, to the enhancement, the engendering of confidence. But how do we see it here? We see it essentially as a ticket, to earning a livelihood. Whereas education serves a much more noble, it serves a nobler role than just the ability to earn a living. Yes, earning a living will come maybe in the as an after effect of it, but it shouldn't necessarily be the primary objective. So if we inculcate into our educational system some shared values around which we can begin to create a sing-song, then of course we can develop a moral, ethical base, ethical ground that will lead us, to lead to the entrenchment or maybe to the development of a strong means of livelihood, not just at the level of the individual, but maybe at the level of the society, the community as a whole.
Very good. Now, on another note, how impactful is values in the realm of politics? You think? We've seen developments in ECOWAS recently, military takeovers, at the slightest of cues. How justified are these scenarios in this regard?
Yeah. Well, you can also see it, as we are seeing it at the national level, we're also seeing it at the international level. Even in ECOWAS, Nigeria is a veritable member of the ECOWAS community, we know, and of course, you can see that people just think that governance, the government process, power, is something that should be acquired for the sake of it. And of course, by doing that, they are helping us. They are unfortunately making us to retrace ourselves from the noble part of democracy. And that's why we were calling the other day that there's no reason why ECOWAS should back down on forcing the government in Niger, not to step down, because we have made a point that democracy is the way to go, is the path to go. And of course, if sanctions that have been presently put in place against Niger, is peppering them, as we can obviously testify to, on account of their resort to the ECOWAS call so that the sanctions can be lifted, then of course we do not expect ECOWAS to back down, even though they are meeting tomorrow in Abuja. We should also remember that President Bazoum is still in jail, still being held, sequestered, just like the wife and the son. So if these characters are not releasing these people, then there's no reason why sanctions should be lifted. If they are treated with kid globe, it will be a disservice to have marched towards democracy, remembering that democracy is a core value that the African countries, even the world at large, has largely subscribed to. Even the most authoritarian regime have some semblance of democracy, with some level of consultation at the level of Politburo, at the level of parliament. So you can see some semblance of representation and inclusion. So if the world as a whole is going toward the path of consultation through democracy, then West Africa or West Africa in the circumstance cannot tow another path. We should insist that democracy is the path to go, and reigning on the governments in West Africa that are still in military, under military rule, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Guinea, to step down, because their remaining there is a disservice to the West African sub-region. And of course, we need to continue to impress it on ECOWAS not to give up, on sanctions, even though they have suspended the planned invasion of Niger to enforce the return to democracy on a very, after they were well advised anyway, as the case could be.
Indeed, Professor Adeniyi, interesting you should mention the word disservice. Now, still on the issue, Sierra Leone recently admitted to an aborted coup attempt. So what's the significance of that to democracy in ECOWAS? We're seeing a ripple down effect, regarding all of this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why we continue to insist that ECOWAS should not back down, because if we are having, out of 15 West African countries, for instance, all of them, subscribing to the ECOWAS protocol, and 4 of them, are under military rule, then what signal are we sending to to those who are power hungry, to those who want to be adventurous, like we probably saw in Sierra Leone? And there's no country in West Africa that does not have the military very strong at that, and we do not want to go back to the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s where we were in that realm of administration, of governance, and considering how imprecise military regime can be, nothing is predictable. And of course, it's just a recipe for crisis and continuous crisis, and it can be very disturbing, really, if authorities that are supposed to rein in on these recalcitrant administrations, yes, fail to do what they are supposed to do, realizing the core essence of democracy. And one essence is what we said earlier, that in Nigeria, for instance, it is identified as one of our core values, that we want to subscribe to, democracy. And of course, I've also made the point severally that democracy is nearest to godliness, because it is representative, it is inclusive, and of course, it encourages citizens to be participatory in the governance process. Yes, we know we have imperfections, but the imperfections, regardless, imperfection is an invitation for us to continue to try.
Right.
And if we are trying in our individual African countries, West African countries, there's no reason, why we should not have that duty of care over other West African countries that are recalcitrant, Niger, for instance. So that's why the sanctions should not be lifted on any ground.
Indeed. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, a Rise News analyst, I'd like to thank you for your thoughts on values and ethics, and of course situations in the ECOWAS sub-region regarding military coups. Good to have you with us.